Hello and welcome to my channel. This is my first long form YouTube video on this account, and I figured I might as well do a quick introduction. My name is Alex. I am a disabled illustrator. I do both digital and traditional art, and I like to incorporate a lot of color into my pieces. I focus a lot on nature and animal themes, but I will venture into more whimsical and cartoony concepts. Essentially, whatever I feel like drawing, I'll draw it. I like the freedom to be able to do whatever I want and bring any of my ideas to life without having that kind of social media obligation of keeping everything the same and consistent. I just don't. It doesn't really work for my brain. I can appreciate that it works for some people, but it just doesn't work for me. So I like to bounce around and experiment and have fun and just try new things. Um, yeah, anyways, now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about this piece here. This is day one, Acorn, of the Peachtober prompts. I've never participated in this particular art challenge before, and I rarely commit to long-term art projects because I know my brain, and my brain does have trouble focusing on these long-term projects where I am expected to draw every single day, and it's a month long. If it's like a week, I can usually manage it a little bit, but my brain just kind of gets overworked and burnt out very easily when it comes to this type of thing. So I usually don't commit to it, but I've known about this challenge for a while, and I decided maybe this would be the year that I could do it. I was put on some meds for the first time in my life, and maybe I would be able to do it. That was kind of my thought process on this. And I also decided to use a much smaller sketchbook to do these prompts because I did want to do color in them. I didn't want to just do pencil sketches. I really wanted to actually make illustrations. And the only way to really do that is to essentially condense the art that you're making. So I had gotten this new sketchbook in the mail. I believe it's an Anaheim something. It's 100% cotton travel sketchbook. It's nice. There are things I like about it, things I don't like about it. I like that it's 100% cotton. I like that it takes wet media very, very well. However, it is prone to pooling a little bit when there's too much water. So I don't know, there might be like a coating on the paper to make the paper extra stiff because it is pretty stiff paper. And this is not like an overly expensive sketchbook. Like it's expensive for the size that it is, but it's not expensive for 100% cotton paper, essentially. The other thing is that in the gluing process, I think that they might have squeegeed a little bit too much glue between the pages. So there is a bit of fraying and tearing of the paper on the inner edge at the seam where the binding is. Not a big deal. I'm not going to be drawing down there so much, and this isn't anything serious, but that's just something that I noticed that I wasn't overly pleased with. But aside from that, I have no complaints. It's a nice little sketchbook, and maybe I would buy it again. I don't know. I haven't gotten through it yet, but I'm enjoying it thus far. So the pink background, that's acrylic ink. I like to put acrylic inks down on the backs of my illustration paper because it can't be reactivated with water or wet media. It stays exactly where you put it, so you can work on top of it, no problem. And I like that it doesn't leave any white spaces, so you don't have to, tighten up your lines quite as much, which takes a little bit of stress out of it. So that's just kind of why I do that. I sketch with watercolor pencils because they blend in a little bit more with the tools that I'm using. Unlike graphite, which just kind of sits there or smudges, and it brings this like really dull gray color to the piece. I don't like that. I want the colors. So I pick a nice watercolor pencil and I just doodle away. So that's a fun thing for you guys to try if you didn't know that you could do that, or if you did, pretend like you didn't, I guess. I don't know. Now, the markers that I'm using are the Shuttle Art dual tone acrylic markers. Shuttle Art did reach out to me and sent me these for free to try on TikTok. And I was excited to try them. They had sent me their acrylic markers before their regular acrylic markers, and I did really enjoy working with those. So I was quite excited to try these out. And honestly, I kind of feel like I might like these a little bit better. They're very, very similar. But just something about like the blendability of them feels a little bit better with this marker than that marker. I don't know. Maybe it's all in my head and I have to do a side by side. I'm not sure. But anyways, they sent me these for free to try and I really love using them. So I'm going to continue to use them. Also, you can go to my TikTok and you can buy them through there. I'm not promoting it or anything, but you know, if you want something to try out and you kind of want to support me at the same time, I do get a little bit of a commission. So there's that. But yeah, I'm just messing around. You don't feel obligated to do any of that stuff. That's really not important. I got what I wanted out of it, which was the art supply. So no worries there. Okay. I don't ever want anyone to ever feel like I am pushing products on them. I'm not here to be an influencer. I'm just here to be an artist. So I will share art supplies with you guys that I really like. I will disclose when things have been sent to me, but I don't ever want anyone to feel obligated to partake in this purchasing thing, to engage in needless consumerism, essentially. So just don't worry about it, all right? Don't worry about it. But if you think it's fun, go ahead and try. Not messing around. So for this, I was kind of just deciding to, like, I wanted to do undertone kind of colors for this. I went in and I decided to kind of put down some darker colors, like my shading colors, or, just undertones that I wanted a particular segment block of color to have before going in with any of the detail work. And then I was going to put my highlights on top because, again, I'm not super well versed with acrylic markers. I am not really used to them and the blending and all of that stuff. I've used them a few times, but not as much for full illustrations, more just kind of experimental concept type doodles. So this was really just kind of pushing my knowledge and experimentation of this particular tool. So I was really just messing around with basically working in reverse for this because I felt like working in reverse was going to put the least amount of pressure on me, because a lot of times when you work from lightest to darkest, which is pretty much standard for most art materials and such, there can always be a little bit of a pressure there to get the details in the shading exactly right, where sometimes you just kind of you think about it so much that you don't think about it enough. And I wanted to kind of just skip over that step, because I was just trying to do this quickly and just trying to mess around with familiarize myself with the markers themselves. And I really do like working in reverse for this. I feel like it gives the shadows a texture that I like, and it just really works with the acrylic markers, and I don't feel the same obligation to blend them out as I would with another medium. As you can see, I'm mixing a few different colors of green for this, and it's just because the two colors that I was using were very muted and desaturated kind of colors, and I wanted to bring some warmth back into it. So I was looking for some light greens with more yellowish undertone, because I'm a big fan of color contrast displaying light and shadow. So I will usually use a lot of warm tones for my lighting and cool tones for my shading. I rarely use black on its own for any piece that I ever work on, unless it's something that's meant to be kind of that dark black and white grungy kind of vibe. But for the most part, anything that I normally do with color, I will be avoiding black, and I usually do either a dark blue or like a dark purple or something in the cool kind of family zone, I guess. I also think that it adds a bit more of like a visual interest, more color pop, so that's another reason why I do that. But I tend to exaggerate the colors that I'm using, so nothing that I'm drawing is meant to directly copy reality. It's meant to imply what the thing is in a more visually interesting way, if that makes sense. I'm just into color. That's just me. Okay. I like color. I'm not so much into realism. I tried it. I can do it. It's not fun for me. So I don't enjoy doing that. I like to add more pops of color and stuff in there. And that's just kind of the main focus of my art, really, is just incorporating color in a visually appealing way in which the concept of the piece isn't lost, I guess. um, so yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing on that. So that's why I chose kind of a muted green color for the acorn body and a pink color for the cap, because I really wanted to push the undertones for the colors that I would be using, which would be like reddish browns and like yellowy browns. So I was just kind of trying to pick colors that I thought would contrast some of the other colors that I would be using in a way that also looked cohesive. I don't know if anything that I'm saying here makes sense. I really don't. I am not great at explaining art processes, which is why I usually avoid it, but I do like commentary in videos, so I figured I would try it myself. I don't know. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole motivation behind that, and a lot of the reference images that I was looking at of acorns on trees, they don't really brown up until they're ripe and they're ready to fall off. So a lot of them are a little bit more green on the tree, so I did want to kind of incorporate that, not quite ripe vibe, which probably gets covered up a little bit. I did try and bring some green back later, but you'll see what I mean when we get there. I just went in with a variety of different browns and pinks, and I threw basically all of the colors at these acorns and hoped for the best. That was the whole vibe that I was bringing to the function. Now these leaves, I'm putting some funky colors on there. Sometimes I will go in and try and make a piece more collectively cohesive by using the same colors over and over again for different aspects of the piece. So even things where that color would not naturally be, I will throw it on there just to kind of tie things together. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's art, baby. Doesn't always work the way you want to, but honestly, I think that this worked fine. I think that the piece flowed together really well in the end. So this may look absolutely crazy and unhinged right now, but trust the process. We're going to get there in the end. We're going to get there in the end, babies. Okay? Promise. Now, I did spend quite a bit of time on these leaves. There was a lot of rendering involved, and I think part of what really took the most time with this was that there was just so many leaves, essentially. So there is a lot of repetition here. And it really did take the most time because of that. And I was really experimenting with the color usage, and I did do a little bit of blending work with the markers to just kind of see how I could get them to blend, because I wasn't focusing on a lot of blending for this piece in general. And yeah, so you're seeing a lot of the dark blues and this reddishy color coming into this and contrasting my green color. And yeah, art stuff. It's probably not overly interesting to watch, but it is what it is. It was fun to do. I didn't really feel stressed doing any of this, which was nice and refreshing. And I think that's a big appeal for sketchbooks for me, is that it just kind of takes that pressure off where you feel like you need to make it perfect. So there's that whole argument, like some classically trained artists will kind of put forth that your sketchbook should never be for anything more than sketches. You should only ever do pencil sketches in sketchbooks. It should only be concept doodles, stuff like that. They have this kind of elitist viewpoint of how to use a sketchbook. And as someone that started out using sketchbooks in that specific way with a lot of pen and pencil and just doodling, it's helpful. It's fun. I encourage having it. I call them shit books, because there's nothing overly good in them. They're not meant to have anything of quality in them. They're just shit to get your concepts out. So everyone should have a shit book, in my opinion. That said, I feel like artistically I have gotten a lot more out of myself and my art by using different types of sketchbooks in the more polished, more finished kind of way. And I feel like people are not willing to accept that sketchbooks can look different. I think that people get really stuck on having like the perfect sketchbook spread, which I don't understand why people focus on having a perfect sketchbook spread. I never even understood the concept of a sketchbook spread until I started seeing other people talking about them and the purpose of them for them. And I was like, oh, well, now it makes sense. You know, you're basically using 2 pages to make a full singular illustration, essentially. And I never had that obligation in my brain. I never felt the need to make everything that I was putting on the page tied together. And I never felt the need to make both pages in a spread cohesive with each other. You know, I always went about it like I'm going to do whatever art I want to do, however I want to do it, and wherever it ends up on the page is where it ends up. That's just how I view sketchbooks in general. So sometimes I'll do a nice spread, you know, if I'm really feeling spicy, but most of the time it's just 2 entirely separate images on each page, you know, just whatever I want, however I want, essentially. But I do like using sketchbooks in this way where I can use color and paint and markers and just experiment and have fun in a low pressure setting, because it's small, it's compact, there's no obligation to make it look good, you know? And if it does look good at the end, congratulations, you did good work. But if it doesn't, oh well, try again, you know? That's just kind of how I feel about, you know, this type of sketchbook. So, I mean, this sketchbook is specifically made for wet media, so, you know, use wet media in it. I just like to, like, experiment, and it just helps me figure out what tools I'm using, how to use them, and how I can better apply them to actual larger pieces, which I don't do a whole lot of super large pieces because I do like to scan my work, and unfortunately, I do not have a large format scanner. Hopefully someday I'll have one, but right now I just don't, and my living situation is not super conducive to large equipment right now. But you know, I have a large format printer, and that's essentially the only thing that I have room for. So I usually do try and keep my pieces a bit smaller, just for that purpose. So usually they're no bigger than a 9x12, and you know, even that, there's a little bit of cropping on the scanner, just not that much. I do like working big. I have done a couple of paintings in a larger format that unfortunately I can't scan. And taking pictures of art is very difficult. You have to have kind of the perfect setup for it. I've done it in the past and it's worked, but it's one of those things where, you know, when I can rescan the piece, when I can actually scan the piece, I probably will, and just update the file in general, because there's just something, like, photos just don't quite do it for me. But, you know, I know that there are, like, professional photo studios out there that actually like, you can rent them out and they'll take pictures of your, you know, huge canvases and stuff, which is cool. I don't have any of those places around me. I don't actually live in a artistic community. I live in a beach town, so there's not a whole lot of art here, and very little culture, really. I mean, we barely have restaurants. It's not great. So obviously there's not really going to be any professional photo studios around that can do that for me. And my dad does he does photography a little bit, and he does take pictures of the art for me when I ask him to. But again, we don't really have a huge space available to us to clear out to make it easier on us to do. So I do tend to work a little bit smaller just for that purpose. You know, if it's something that I'm working on that I really want to scan, or something that I am intending on making merchandise out of, then I will typically work a bit smaller. But I have been experimenting lately with more large canvases and just pushing myself to do bigger work, and I've really enjoyed that and had a lot of fun with it. So I hope I hope before too long I'll be able to actually have the resources available to digitize all of that stuff, because I'd really love to be able to do that. Anyways, if you've been watching me color in this acorn here, you've seen me throw basically every color in the book at it. Full disclosure, I had a vision in my head, and the vision started falling apart on me, and I was trying to save it. So a lot of that was just me kind of going through and trying to get the look that was in my head back, because there were, again, I was exclusively using the shuttle art dual tips for this, the dual tone markers for all of the coloring portion, besides the color pencil stuff you'll see later. So just the bulk of this was supposed to just be that particular supply, which is, there's only 48 colors in it, and not all of the colors are exactly conducive to the nuances and color shifts that I wanted. So there would be big gaps in colors, there would be missing colors for what I need, a lot of bright stuff and then not as much desaturated stuff. So it was just kind of a game of mixing different colors together to get the vibe that I wanted. So there is a lot of back and forth in this portion. So, artists struggle too. It's fine. But I mean, in the end, I pulled it together. But it was at this point pretty touch and go. And I honestly was looking at this like, oh, so this is how it ends for me, huh? This is how it goes. But I fought it. I just kept throwing paint down, and eventually we got there. So, trust the process, babies. You'll get somewhere. I sure did. Honestly, so, I mean, the acorns was probably the most annoying part of this, which I thought would be the easiest part of this. And I was honestly a bit peeved that it wasn't the easiest part of this. But again, that's just kind of how the artistic process works. And when you're experimenting and doing new things, things aren't always going to work the way you want. And a lot of art is problem solving. You're spending a lot of time just making moves and then trying to correct the moves. You're trying to solve problems. You're trying to figure out what colors should go where and what way you should put them on the paper. And you're solving puzzles every time you pick up a pencil. Essentially, it's just a jigsaw puzzle without pieces. So yeah, I was just trying to problem solve, and I got there, and it was fine. And I ended up really enjoying the piece in general. I thought it came out quite nice. I think that it came out probably as good as it could have with the supplies that I was using. And I had fun doing it, even though I did get frustrated in the middle. I did have fun doing it, and that's the main thing about art for me, is it has to be fun to do. And if it's not fun to do, then I really don't want to do it, because the second that I stop having fun is the second that I'm going to stop working on it. I have several unfinished pieces from like 10 years ago that I will probably never ever revisit, even though I sunk a ton of time into them, because they stopped being fun. They were just frustrating. I didn't know what I was doing, and then the whole process got soured by me feeling overwhelmed. So, I mean, I have half-finished artwork sitting in drawers and painted canvases that I never went back to because I just was overwhelmed and felt lost and stopped having fun with it. So, essentially, yeah, if I stop having fun, then the art stops getting made. Now, I'm a big paint girly. I do a lot of painting stuff. I like to use gouache a lot, and like acrylics I'll use. But I have to say, like, acrylic markers are really convenient because, I mean, it kind of really does combine, paint and convenience, which paint is historically super inconvenient of a material to use. And I like that I'm able to just hold it in my hand mess-free and just... I can shove a marker in my bag and take it with me and not worry about the space that it takes up, or, any, like there being any mess or anything or any spillage. And I don't have to worry about, like, acrylic paints, how you have to keep them wet and stuff when you're traveling with them, and you don't have to carry tubes around. And it's just, it's not convenient to take tubes of paint with you places. So, outside of like a travel watercolor gouache set, acrylic markers are, they're really growing on me as like a cool supply that that's just really convenient. So, I'm honestly, I'm really enjoying them. I'm trying to work with them a bit more. And I do like to incorporate them into my work because I do a lot of mixed media. I mean, I'm a mixed media artist, so you see color pencil going into it and different paint types going into it and all that kind of normal mixed media stuff. Now, I essentially use my color pencils in a similar way that I use my paints and markers, and the way that I pick colors is basically the same process. I just kind of try and pick slightly darker, more contrasted colors, but again, I try to avoid using black, so I'll use like indigo, ultramarine blue, I'll use this dark brownish red color that I can't remember the name of, and I like to just use whatever colors I like, but as long as it's like a color, that's just how I use all of my art supplies basically. As for how I actually pick those colors, I don't really know how to answer that question. I know that a lot of people have like a method or theory in their head for how they pick their colors and how they use their materials, and for me, I mean, I get by on vibes. I don't really I've tried to figure out how to explain it to people, and I still can't, because in general I really don't know exactly what pushes me to pick the colors that I do outside of a basic, light and shadow, and this color is a part of it, so you should incorporate it here, and like aside from just mixing colors in, I don't know. I don't know if it's like a visual thing. I really don't know. So don't ask me how I do it, because girly pop, I don't know. I just throw colors down, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. That's just kind of how I live my life. If I'm lucky, it works. But I think there's like tons of videos out there, for people that, are kind of trying to embark on like a colorism journey, and there's like a lot of videos out there by people explaining how to pick your colors and work. I just might not necessarily be the kind of person that would be good at explaining that. But if you can get anything out of this, just watching me pick colors, go for it, dog. I don't I don't know, maybe you'll be more aware of this process than I am, but I've just always kind of liked to use bright colors and contrasting colors, and I like the way that colors can imply light and shadow and texture, and that's just kind of how I go about using my colors. So yeah, essentially, we're kind of here nearing the end of this piece, which, color pencil is usually my last stop, either that or a Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2, and it's just really, I put my details in, define stuff. I don't typically go for full outlines. I like to do partial outlines and stuff just to define things, but I don't necessarily always like it to fully pop off the page, and I like to use different colors and blend them in together to kind of give that kind of natural vibe to it. So I mean, pretty much all that's happening here is just the final definition and just covering up any of the blank spaces that are a little bit too light, just kind of going through there and polishing. We're going through the final polish phase of this piece. I do post to other social medias outside of YouTube. I post quite a bit to TikTok. TikTok is a mixture of my art and, some personal ramblings and stuff like that. So if you're interested in me as a person, TikTok could be fun for you. If you don't give a shit about me as a person, maybe just stay on YouTube, because I usually just post art stuff on my YouTube. So outside of maybe any commentary that happens, it's pretty much just going to be art stuff. I don't use Twitter. I have one. I don't use it. I don't like it. I have an Instagram. You can definitely follow my Instagram. I will link these things below for you. I do have a Tumblr. My Tumblr is hit or miss. I usually end up forgetting to post stuff there, but, sometimes I will. I just find that engagement on Tumblr is not that great overall. It just kind of people engage with the things that they're interested in, but they don't really care about the artist. So, yeah. I also have a Facebook, which, I mean, you're welcome to follow that. Again, I will link everything down below. If you like this kind of video, please leave a comment and let me know. I know that people had asked on some of my shorts for me to do more long form content, and that, you know, they said that they had expressed an interest in my long form content. So if this is something that you enjoy, is something that you like, if there's something that you want me to change, if you want to have me change how I edit things, because I did crop out a bit of the, I clipped out chunks, but I tried to keep as much of it in as I possibly could because it's like an art process video. But, you know, if this is too long for you, you know, let me know. If you don't mind the length, that's totally cool. I like long videos personally, but also, you know, I don't know. You let me know how you feel about it. Yeah. Also, I have a coffee. If you want to support me on coffee, you are more than welcome to. I also do have some merchandise for sale on my coffee, and I do offer pet portrait commissions on there as well. They are listed as digital. I can do traditional, but it will be more expensive than the digital ones listed. So if you are interested in pet portraits, I do have that listed on my coffee as well. And you can just feel free to follow me on my coffee because I post merchandise there. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope that you have a really lovely day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!